The May sun and Jiang Tingshen baked the sycamore fluff drifting in front of the Civil Affairs Bureau, the white tufts falling like snow that had arrived in entirely the wrong season. Jiang Tingshen climbed out of the taxi holding an ordinary craft paper document folder. His dark blue jacket was a discount buy from 2 years ago, the cuffs already worn pale. Standing on the gray-white marble steps in front of the bureau, surrounded by people dressed in gleaming, fashionable clothes, he looked utterly out of place. Wen Yining was already there. Her white Porsche sat in a reserved spot by the curb, its body spotless, so bright under the sun it stung the eyes. Today she wore a pearl-white tailored suit, her hair swept up without a single strand out of place, the Patek Philippe on her wrist gleaming with a cold, understated light. For 3 years now, wherever she appeared she was like a blade freshly drawn from its sheath, sharp, icy, flawless. Jiang Tingshen walked up the steps. Wen Yining did not look at him. She simply gestured with her chin toward the hall and turned to walk inside first. Her pace was brisk, her high heels clicking against the terrazzo floor. Tap, 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 like the hand of a countdown clock.
The divorce registration office was on the 3rd floor.
The hallway was lined with 7 or 8 waiting couples. Some had red-rimmed eyes. Some wore dark scowls. A young couple was still bickering in low voices. Jiang Tingshen and Wen Yining sat on the bench shoulder to shoulder without a single word, the space between them exactly wide enough for one more person. When their number was called, Wen Yining stood up first. She pushed open the glass door marked with the divorce registration sign. The air conditioning inside was turned up high. On the desk sat an old-style printer and 2 stacks of forms. The clerk was a woman in her 40s. She glanced up at them expressionless and asked, "Are the papers all signed?"
Wen Yining pulled the divorce agreement from her Hermes bag and placed it on the desk.
The agreement was 8 pages long, each page bearing both parties' signatures and thumbprints at the bottom. The edges of the paper were crisp, not a single crease. Clearly the final version her lawyers had checked and double-checked. Jiang Tingshen's gaze swept over the document. The section on property division was written out clearly. All marital assets belonged to the wife. The husband voluntarily relinquished all claims. As compensation, Wen Yining would transfer a property on Jiangwan Road under her personal name to the husband, plus 3 million yuan in cash. 3 million plus an apartment. In Jiangcheng, that was an amount most people could not save in a lifetime. But in Wen Yining's world, this sum was merely spare change from last quarter's dividend. The Wen Group was worth over 5 billion, and Wen Yining, as the sole daughter and newly appointed president, had a personal net worth of at least 2 billion. Jiang Tingshen did not look at the papers a second time. He picked up the black pen lying on the desk. It was hers, a limited edition Mont Blanc, cold metallic silver, heavy in the hand, like gripping a piece of ice. Wen Yining spoke, her tone as detached as ever.
"You've already seen the place on Jiangwan.
If you want to change the decor, you can do that anytime." Her voice carried no inflection, as if she were briefing a task that had nothing whatsoever to do with her. Jiang Tingshen did not reply. He flipped to the last page, found the line where the husband was to sign, and set the nib down.
Jiang Tingshen.
3 characters, 1 continuous stroke, clean and decisive.
No trembling, no hesitation, no pause, as if he were signing for an ordinary courier delivery.
Wen Yining's eyelashes flickered.
She clearly had not expected him to sign so quickly. Over the past 3 years, he had always been so cautious around her, even thinking twice before deciding which way to walk around her in the company cafeteria. She had probably assumed he would say something today, ask for one more chance, or at least, like countless times before, humbly murmur, "Yining, can we please talk again?" Jiang Tingshen gave her no room to speak. He stood up, pushed the signed agreement back across the desk toward her, and tapped the tabletop lightly with the knuckle of his middle finger. The sound was very soft, yet it made Wen Yining's hand freeze in midair. Jiang Tingshen spoke, his voice so calm it could have been reporting the weather. "President Wen, the paperwork is done. I wish the Wen Group ever-growing success."
President Wen. In 3 years, this was the first time he had addressed her by that title.
Wen Yining's brow furrowed, almost imperceptibly, but only for a moment. She quickly resumed her poised and indifferent expression, put the agreement away in her bag, and nodded to the clerk.
The rest of the process moved quickly.
The steel seal came down with a sharp click, and 2 divorce certificates were pushed toward them. Red covers, gilded lettering, looking just like the marriage certificates from 3 years ago, except for 2 characters. Walking out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, the May sunlight crashed down, bright and blinding.
Jiang Tingshen stood on the steps and drew a deep breath.
The air no longer carried Wen Yining's cold, refined perfume. It was so clean it had been scrubbed by a rainstorm. He suddenly wanted to laugh, but decided laughing would be too much trouble, so he simply pulled out his phone.
Wen Yining brushed past him without stopping.
The white Porsche started its engine and silently slipped into traffic, vanishing beneath the canopy of sycamore trees. Jiang Tingshen watched the car disappear, then pressed the call button. The line picked up after a single ring. A steady male voice came from the other end. Tingshen, tell me. Fang Yu, Jiang Tingshen's voice remained low, but every word was distinct. Notify Lu Chen. Before the market closes today, liquidate every single share of the Wen Group I hold.
All of it.
There was a 2-second silence on the other end. Fang Yu carefully confirmed, all of it? Not a single share left? Tingshen, Wen Group's stock price is at a historic high right now. Your 9% stake is worth roughly. Jiang Tingshen cut him off. I know exactly what it's worth. Precisely because it's at a high, we sell it all today. Fang Yu asked no further questions. He had been with Jiang Tingshen for 8 years, and he understood one thing better than anyone. When Jiang Tingshen said all, he meant truly all, not a share left, not a cent remaining. Fang Yu's voice became crisp.
Understood.
I will arrange it immediately. Hanging up, Jiang Tingshen stuffed the phone into his pocket and flagged down a taxi at the curb. Outside the window, the sycamore fluff kept drifting, a vast blur of white landing on the glass before the wind swept it away. Leaning back in his seat, he closed his eyes and felt the iron plate that had been pressing on his chest for 3 years, finally pried open. What seeped through that crack was not anger, not grievance, not even relief. It was lightness, a lightness that came from deep in the bones, like a diver finally surfacing, ears still ringing, but lungs filled with air they had been starved of for far too long.
3 years.
He had spent 3 years as the live-in son-in-law of the Wen family, 3 years pouring tea and fetching water, 3 years enduring cold words and dismissive glances.
Wen Yining's mother, Dongwan Qing, never missed a family dinner without repeating the same line. Our Yining is simply too kind.
If it weren't for her, how could Tingshen have the life he has today? Wen Yining's younger brother, Wen Yichen, had just last month pointed at his nose at a banquet and said, "Brother-in-law, tell me, besides relying on my sister, what exactly can you do?" Even the receptionist at the Wen Group headquarters looked at him with a subtle pity she did not bother to hide. Everyone believed Jiang Tingshen was a nobody, no background, no connections, no talent, a man who only had food on his plate because he had married the right woman. The absurd part was, the nobody they all saw was a shell he had crafted with his own hands. What lay hidden inside that shell, they were not even qualified to catch a glimpse of. As the taxi merged onto the airport expressway, his phone vibrated. Jiang Tingshen glanced down. A message from Fang Yu. Cheng Yan has begun the operation. Expected to clear everything before the close.
At current prices, total cash out estimated at 10.3 billion.
10.3 billion. He locked the screen and flipped the phone face down on his knee. To someone else, that number might seem astronomical, but to him it was merely a chess piece long ago positioned on the board of Deep Blue Technology. 3 years ago, when he had invested in the Wen Group, the capital had come through Deep Blue Technology's overseas platform, a 9% stake spread across 7 different investment accounts. The Wen family had investigated for 3 years and never figured out who the actual controller behind those accounts was. It never crossed their minds that the son-in-law who clocked in at 9 and left at 6 every day, quietly brewing tea in the company break room, was the true owner of that capital. The airport arrived. Jiang Tingshen checked in, passed through security, and stopped in front of the boarding gate. He pulled out his phone, removed the SIM card, snapped it in half, and tossed it into the trash. The number stored on that card was the one Wen Yining had saved for 3 years, the one she had dialed countless times. From this moment on, that number would never be used again. He inserted a brand new card, its number known only to Fang Yu and Lu Chen. The plane took off on time. Jiang Tingshen sat in the first-class window seat. Outside, a boundless blue sky stretched above a blanket of clouds, pure white, clean as a blank sheet of paper. When the flight attendant brought him coconut water, he was leaning back with his eyes closed. The last image flickering through his mind was from the wedding 3 years ago.
Wen Yining, in her custom-designed gown, standing at the center of the banquet hall, smiling gracefully as she addressed the room full of guests. Tingshen comes from an ordinary background, but what I value is his talent. Talent?
She had made him sound like a diamond in the rough she had personally discovered, a lucky man plucked from the crowd. She would never know who the man she called from an ordinary background really was. But she did not need to know anymore. The plane broke through the clouds, and the cabin announcement came on. reporting the weather at the destination. Ground temperature 32 degrees Celsius, abundant sunshine, calm seas. Jiang Tingshen opened his eyes and looked out at the expanse of blinding white beyond the window, the corner of his mouth finally lifting into the faintest of smiles. Sonia, he said to himself, I'm here. When the plane touched down at Sonia International Airport, the sky outside the window was a blue so intense it hurt to keep your eyes open. Jiang Tingshen removed his eye mask, unbuckled his seatbelt, and adjusted his seat back upright. He had not slept a single minute during the nearly 7-hour flight. Instead, he had spent the entire time reading Deep Blue Technology's quarterly reports on his tablet. The man beside him, a middle-aged businessman wearing a thick gold chain, had been drinking since takeoff and was now passed out cold, snoring loud enough to shake the cabin. Jiang Tingshen closed his tablet and rubbed his temples. The plane came to a stop, the cabin door opened, and a blast of hot, humid sea air rushed in, carrying the mingled saltiness of the ocean and the sweet fragrance of tropical flowers. He peeled off the jacket with the frayed cuffs, draped it over his arm, and walked down the steps in just a white t-shirt, a single carry-on bag in hand. The airport was tiny. Its terminal building painted a bright yellow, the palm fronds overhead rustling noisily in the sea wind. In the immigration line, the couple ahead of him was on their honeymoon. The girl chattered away while leaning on the boy's shoulder, and the boy listened with a blissful smile, occasionally bending down to kiss the top of her head.
Jiang Tingshen shifted his gaze and stared blankly at the coconut trees outside the window.
Clearing immigration, collecting his luggage, he hailed a local taxi. The driver, a dark-skinned local, asked in broken English where he wanted to go. Jiang Tingshen gave the name of a hotel. The driver flashed a grin, floored the gas, and the battered Honda roared down the coastal highway. To either side stretched vast groves of coconut palms, and beyond them lay the sea. Sonia's sea was nothing like Jiangcheng's. Jiangcheng's sea was a grayish blue, as if draped in a filter of industrialization. The water here was a translucent turquoise, layered from the shore to the deep, impossibly beautiful. His phone rang. It was not a regular call but an alert from his encrypted messaging app. Jiang Tingshen lit up the screen, a message from Lu Chen. Boss Cheng Yan has started the operation. Jiang Tingshen typed back swiftly. Progress. Lu Chen's reply popped up almost instantly. First sell orders went out at 9:40, 3 batches totaling 2%. Cheng Yan split it into 13 trades, each moderate in size, no alarms triggered. The buyers are 3 institutions, 2 overseas investment platforms, 1 domestic private equity fund. Jiang Tingshen replied with a single word. Good. He put the phone down just as the road passed a cliff, where white waves slammed against the rock face, the spray catching rainbows in the sunlight. A few minutes later, Lu Chen sent another message. Boss, there's one thing you didn't mention. Wen Group's stock is genuinely at a historic peak right now. They just released their annual report. Revenue up 37%, profit doubled, the market is red hot. Today's move should net at least $1 billion more than if Wed done it last month. Jiang Tingshen did not reply to this one. He glanced at it and turned off the screen. $1 billion, an unimaginable fortune to an ordinary person. But to Deep Blue Technology, this amount was nothing more than a set of numbers flickering on a balance sheet. Deep Blue Technology, founded 5 years ago, focused on solid-state batteries and foundational new energy technology research, with R&D centers in 4 countries and patents ranking among the top 3 domestically. Just last month, Deep Blue's next-generation solid-state battery had passed final certification from the National Energy Administration. The mass production license was in hand, and the first batch of international orders totaled $27 billion. In other words, that 9% stake in the Wen Group had never been Jiang Tingshen's entire fortune, not even his primary asset. Those 9 percentage points were merely a pawn he had casually thrown into the Wen Group 3 years ago. A pawn, nothing more. The car stopped in front of the hotel. It was a 3-story white building facing the sea, its outer walls covered in blooming bougainvillea, every room featuring a large balcony overlooking the ocean. Jiang Tingshen checked in, carried his luggage into the room, and pushed open the floor-to-ceiling window to the balcony. The briny sea breeze instantly filled the entire room. He changed into shorts and flip-flops, sent Fang Yu a message, I'm here. For the next 24 hours, don't call me for anything. Send encrypted emails if something comes up, and got an immediate reply. Understood. He added another line, if anyone finds you and asks where I am, tell them you don't know. Fang Yu replied, Tingshen Gi, you've changed your number. Nobody at the company can even reach you. They can't ask anything. I can handle it. Jiang Tingshen set his phone to silent and went down to the beach. Sonia's beach was white, the sand fine as flour, soft and yielding underfoot. He rented a lounge chair, ordered an iced coconut, put on his sunglasses, and lay back comfortably. In the distance, a few children chased each other through the surf, their laughter fragmented by the sea wind. A white couple had spread a blanket on the sand and lay motionless in the sun. The whole world was slow, lazy, utterly unconcerned, an entire 12,000 kilometers away from the scheming commercial circles of Jiangcheng. Jiang Tingshen closed his eyes, and his mind began to retrace automatically. The wedding 3 years ago.
Wen Yining.
The Wen family.
He had met Wen Yining at a tech forum.
Back then, Deep Blue Technology had just completed its first funding round, and he was still a tech fanatic who spent day and night in the lab, wearing a faded t-shirt, his hair a mess. He had chatted with Wen Yining for 20 minutes about solid-state battery technical pathways. He thought she had understood him. He even felt he had found someone who truly grasped what he was doing. Wen Yining was indeed sharp. She immediately recognized the commercial value of the technology and had her secretary send over a letter of intent that very evening. But before the cooperation agreement could be signed, the relationship between the two of them shifted subtly.
Wen Yining pursued him, direct and decisive without a trace of hesitation.
Jiang Tingshen was moved, not because of the Wen family's money, but because he genuinely believed he had found a companion who could stand beside him at the pinnacle of technology. Before the wedding, his partner Qin Mo had warned him, "Lao Jiang, think it through. A family-run business like the Wen Group, a tech guy like you going in there, life won't be easy." Jiang Tingshen did not listen. He entrusted Deep Blue Technology entirely to Qin Mo and Lu Chen, and under the name Jiang Tingshen, a perfectly ordinary name, a perfectly ordinary background, a perfectly ordinary person, he entered the Wen household. He wanted to see whether, stripped of all his achievements, Wen Yining would still treat him as an equal partner. He got his answer very quickly.
Wen Yining did not treat him as a partner.
She treated him as a variable to be managed, a husband who could be slotted into a sinecure, a supporting character whose role at family dinners was to pour tea, a transparent man who could be handled with a 5,000 yuan monthly allowance. It was not that she was cruel, it was that her world was too narrow enough to contain only the Wen Group, Dongwon King's disapproving frowns, Wen Yichen's willfulness, and the day-in day-out flattery of that childhood friend Pei Jinyan. Pei Jinyan, the name scraped across Jiang Tingshen's mind like a dull blade on glass. Vice president of the Wen Group, a family friend of the Wen Yining's childhood sweetheart. Over these 3 years, Pei Jinyan had been the biggest thorn buried in Jiang Tingshen's flesh. In front of Wen Yining, Pei Jinyan always played the modest gentleman. Toward Jiang Tingshen, he wore a perpetual mask of condescending politeness. That politeness was subtle, nothing you could fault on the surface, but every time his eyes met Jiang Tingshen's, a flash of undisguised contempt crossed his face, as though he were looking at a thief who had stolen something that did not belong to him. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Jiang Tingshen pulled it out, an encrypted email from Fang Yu. He opened the attachment, and pages of stock transaction confirmation slowly loaded. From 9:40 in the morning until the 3 o'clock market close, his 9% stake in the Wen Group had been broken into dozens of trades and absorbed by 3 institutions, without triggering any market anomaly. The final line showed the total. Cash out of 11.43 billion. More than 400 million over the estimate, because the late trading session had rallied a bit and Cheng Yan had offloaded the last few batches at a higher price. Jiang Tingshen finished reading the email and calmly placed the phone face down on the beach chair. 11.43 billion. 3 years ago, he had bought into these shares at a cost of 2.5 billion. 3 years later, he had shed them all for 11.43 billion. By any investment return metric, it was a flawless transaction. But for him, the true meaning of this money was not the profit. It was that from this moment on, he had absolutely nothing left to do with the Wen Group. The sunset on the beach was sinking toward the horizon, setting the entire sky ablaze in orange and red. The children in the distance had been called home for dinner. The white couple had packed up their blanket. A white yacht drifted slowly across the water, leaving a long wake behind. Jiang Tingshen stood, tossed the empty coconut shell into the trash, and dusted the sand from his hands. Time to head back to the hotel. He ambled back along the path he had come, his flip-flops making soft puff-puff sounds on the sand. The sea breeze blew against his white t-shirt, making it snap and flutter. His silhouette looked lighter than when he had arrived, as if he had shed an invisible shell. As he walked into the hotel lobby, his phone vibrated once more. This time it was not an encrypted email, it was an unknown number. He glanced at the area code, Jiangcheng. Jiang Tingshen did not answer. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, walked to the front desk, and asked the receptionist for a bottle of ice water. The receptionist, a local girl with a ponytail, handed him the water and said with a smile in English, "Sir, the hotel is having a beach barbecue party tonight. You're very welcome to join." Jiang Tingshen took the water and smiled back.
Thank you.
He unscrewed the cap and took a sip. The water slid down his throat, cold and refreshing, clearing every corner of his body. Outside the floor-to-ceiling window behind him, the last sliver of sunset was just dipping below the sea's surface. The sky faded from orange to deep blue, then slowly darkened, darker and darker, until it settled into a heavy, silent blackness. Everything that had belonged to the Wen family was left behind in that blackness, completely and forever. On the third day after Jiang Tingshen left Jiangcheng, the atmosphere inside the Wen Group headquarters was strung as taut as a wire about to snap. At 9:30 in the morning, Wen Yining walked into the president's office on the 23rd floor right on time. This office had originally belonged to her father Wen Zhengming, who had stepped back from day-to-day operations 3 years ago due to illness. Wen Yining had been serving as acting president ever since, but the formal handover paperwork had only been completed the previous month. The office was a full 80 square meters, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing a panoramic river view, a calligraphy piece Wen Zhengming had personally brushed years ago hanging above the rosewood desk. Great virtue bears all things. Today, however, Wen Yining was not in the mood to admire the river view. She sat in the wide leather executive chair, her computer screen lit up with an urgent report from the finance director. The report's title was a single line, and she stared at it for a full 3 minutes, an explanation regarding the change in shareholding of former shareholder Mr.
Jiang Tingshen.
Wen Yining picked up the internal line and dialed the finance department's extension, her voice cold as the river surface in the depths of winter.
"Tell Director Chen to come to my office." Now, 3 minutes later, Finance Director Chen Boyong trotted through the president's door, practically jogging. He was 54 years old and had overseen the Wen Group's accounts for more than 20 years, weathering countless storms, yet right now his forehead was beaded with fine sweat, the edges of the documents in his hand already crinkled from his grip. Wen Yining did not invite him to sit. She cut straight to the point.
"When did it happen?"
Chen Boyong placed the documents on the desk, his voice lowered. 3 days ago, the same day you and Mr. Jiang completed the formalities. Someone liquidated every single share of the 9% stake in Mr. Jiang's name before the market closed. They broke it into dozens of transactions. The buyers were 3 institutions. Wen Yining flipped open the file, going through page by page. Every page held a brokerage trade confirmation, execution time, volume, price, all clear, without a single flaw. The summary figure on the last page made her pupils contract. 11.43 billion. She slapped the file shut, her voice rising.
Who executed it?
Chen Boyong wiped his forehead. "We checked the trading authorization records for the 7 accounts under Mr. Jiang's name. They were all executed through the same brokerage office. The broker in charge was a man named Fang Yu."
Fang Yu.
Wen Yining repeated the name to herself, recalling the young man who had always shadowed Jiang Tingshen.
She had seen Fang Yu a few times. Her impression was of a taciturn, efficient young man whose relationship with Jiang Tingshen did not seem like that of an ordinary assistant, more like a fiercely loyal deputy. Chen Boyong continued his report.
Even more unusual are the buyers.
2 of the 3 institutions are overseas investment platforms. One of them is registered in the Cayman Islands under the name. He glanced down at his notebook, Azure International Holdings. Azure International Holdings.
Wen Yining ground these 6 syllables between her teeth.
The Cayman Islands, offshore registration, opaque shareholding structure. This was a textbook shell company. A shell company registered in a tax haven, which without any prior indication, had precisely absorbed 4% of the Wen Group's shares on the very day Jiang Tingshen dumped them, a transaction worth over 5 billion. This was not an improvised purchase. This had been set up in advance. Wen Yining stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, her back to Chen Boyong, and stayed silent for a long time. Outside, Zhongcheng's most prosperous riverside avenue was a river of traffic under the blazing sun. The light struck the glass, blurring her reflection into a smear of white. "Director Chen," she finally said, her tone even colder than before, "are you telling me that Jiang Tingshen colluded with this Azure International ahead of time and dumped all the shares right under my nose?" Chen Boyong chose his words carefully. "President Wen, there is currently no direct evidence of prior collusion, but the timeline is simply too coincidental. Azure International was established on," he checked his notebook again, "April 20th of this year, less than half a month before the sell-off. Moreover, the company's registered capital is a mere $1 million. It has no operating history whatsoever. Yet, it was able to produce over $5 billion in cash to take those shares 3 days ago. This does not look like a normal commercial investment. Wen Yining turned around, her face now entirely devoid of readable emotion. She pulled open a drawer and placed another document on the desk. The first executive order she had signed 2 days ago, an asset preservation notice freezing the Jiangwan Road property under Jiang Tingshen's name. Since we cannot get to the bottom of the stock issue right now, we will start by making him hand over the Jiangwan house. She sat back down, her voice returning to its customary calm authority.
Notify the legal department.
On the grounds that Jiang Tingshen has failed to appear in person to complete the property transfer, apply to the court for an extension of the asset freeze, maximum duration. Chen Boyong was momentarily stunned. President Wen, that property is only worth about 30 million. Freezing, it is really Wen Yining cut him off. I am not after the money. I want him back in Jiangcheng to deal with this. He has run off abroad. His phone is disconnected. He does not answer emails. His assistant plays dumb. The apartment is something he agreed to take over when he signed the papers. I am not going to let him sit on some beach, free and easy. Chen Boyong opened his mouth, but in the end said nothing. He gathered the documents, nodded and hurried out. After the office door clicked shut, Wen Yining sat alone in the silent room, staring at the shareholding change report for a very long time. The face Jiang Tingshen had worn 3 days ago at the Civil Affairs Bureau, as he stood up after signing that face surfaced in her mind now with utter clarity. Calm.
Far too calm.
It did not look like the face of a man who had just ended a 3-year marriage. It looked like a gambler who had waited 3 years and had finally been given the chance to place his bet. He had called her President Wen. That title, like a tiny needle, had been lodged somewhere in her chest for the past 3 days, in a place she could not quite name. Jiang Tingshen had never provoked her, never resisted her, never put her in an awkward position. He had always been so careful, so tentative, even checking her expression before reaching for a dish at the dinner table. But the day he said President Wen, there had been not the slightest ripple in his eyes. It was not suppressed rage. It was not passive-aggressive sulking. It was relief, pure, unadulterated relief. Wen Yining's hand unconsciously tightened around her pen until her knuckles paled. A knock came at the door. Her assistant's voice followed. President Wen, Vice President Pei is here. He said he had a 10 o'clock meeting with you. Let him in. The door opened and Pei Jinyan walked in. Pei Jinyan was 32 years old this year and had served as vice president of the Wen Group for 5 years. He was tall and lean, impeccably dressed in a tailored gray suit, his features regular, his manner genteel. In any public setting he looked every inch the standard corporate elite. He and Wen Yining had grown up together. Their two families were old family friends. Before Wen Yining married Jiang Tingshen, everyone had assumed Pei Jinyan was the most suitable candidate. He sat down in the chair across from her, his eyes flicking to the papers spread on her desk. Yining, he said with a tone of careful concern, you're investigating Tingshen's matter? Wen Yining flipped the file face down. She made a brief sound of assent. Pei Jinyan sighed, his voice carrying the just right measure of regret. Honestly, I never imagined he would pull something like this. 3 years everyone saw how well you treated him. He should be grateful, but instead the moment he leaves you with this mess.
Wen Yining said nothing.
Pei Jinyan leaned forward and lowered his voice. But that said, can one man really move over 10 billion in capital on his own? That assistant Fang Yu, capable as he may be, has still a small-time operator.
Could there be someone backing him from behind?
Wen Yining looked at him.
What are you trying to say?
Pei Jinyan spread his hands. I just find the timing of this Azure International too convenient. A shell company, registered barely 2 weeks ago, and the first thing it does is drop over 5 billion into Wen Group. That does not resemble normal business. I had someone check the shareholding structure of this company down in the Caymans. And did you find anything? We got through one layer, then the trail went cold. The shareholder is a BVI company. The actual controller behind it is unknown. Pei Jinyan's tone turned pointed. But one detail is very interesting. The registered address of this BVI company happens to be in the same office building as the overseas investment platform Deep Blue Technology set up 2 years ago. Deep Blue Technology.
Wen Yining's brow furrowed.
Deep Blue Technology had been the biggest dark horse in the domestic new energy sector these past 2 years. Its solid-state battery technology leading the world. Its valuation already breaking 50 billion. The Wen Group was currently negotiating a massive deal with the state-owned enterprise Wen Group. Parts of the technical proposal involved battery management systems, And if Deep Blue Technology were willing to cooperate, wait, she fixed her gaze on Pei Jinyan. You just said Deep Blue Technology's investment platform is linked to Azure International? Pei Jinyan smiled. I haven't finished yet. Even more coincidental, the person in charge of that Deep Blue platform is a man named Lu Chen, and Jiang Tingshen's assistant, Fang Yu. He and Lu Chen used to work at the same investment bank. They were in a senior-subordinate relationship. Yining, do you really believe these are all coincidences? Silence fell over the office. Wen Yining's fingers tapped the desktop, slow and rhythmic. In her mind, she rapidly threaded all the loose ends together: Jiang Tingshen's sudden decision to sign the divorce papers, the immediate clearance of all shares that same day, the precision of the Cayman Shell Company's buy-in, the working relationship between Fang Yu and Lu Chen, the overlapping addresses of Deep Blue Technology's offshore platform and Azure International. A possibility she had never once entertained was slowly coalescing out of these fragments. Pei Jinyan pressed on, his tone growing more confident. So my guess is that the person behind Jiang Tingshen is very likely a senior figure at Deep Blue Technology, or even when Yining raised a hand to stop him. She picked up the internal line and dialed the legal department. When the call connected, her voice had returned to the decisive coolness of a president. This is Wen Yining. Regarding the freeze application on the Jiangwan Road property under Jiang Tingshen's name, I want to add a clause. During the freeze period, any pledge, guarantee, or transfer involving this property is to be denied processing. The freeze is extended to 6 months. Additionally, notify him in person. If he does not return to Jiangcheng within 3 days to complete the handover, we will initiate breach of contract proceedings. She hung up and turned to Pei Jinyan, a cold light in her eyes. Jinyan, keep digging into Deep Blue Technology. You have 3 days. I don't care how you do it. Find out exactly what relationship Jiang Tingshen has with Deep Blue Technology. Pei Jinyan stood, adjusted his suit lapels, and smiled as mildly as ever.
Don't worry.
3 days is enough. He turned to leave and paused at the door, looking back. Oh, by the way, Yining, the founder of Deep Blue Technology, has always been a mystery. Never once shown his face in public. The industry gossips say he might be a tech prodigy returned from overseas, or maybe a guy who once wrote the first version of a solid-state battery core architecture in a rented room. He laughed softly, but absolutely no one would guess it could be the live-in son-in-law who poured tea at your family's dinner table for 3 years. Pei Jinyan pushed the door and walked out. Wen Yining sat in her chair and stared at the closed door for a long time, then flipped over the shareholding change report she had concealed. The last page: Azure International Holdings registration details, BVI company number, registered address, date of incorporation. Date of incorporation, April 20, 2023. 4 days later, she had signed the divorce agreement. Another 3 days after that, Jiang Tingshen had dumped all his shares to this very company, cashed out $11.43 billion, and flown to the other side of the world. She picked up her phone and dialed Jiang Tingshen's number. The mechanical female voice came through the earpiece. The number you have dialed is not in service. Wen Yining slammed the phone onto the desk, the metal backplate striking the rosewood with a dull thud. She closed her eyes, her chest heaving several times before it slowly steadied. Outside the window, the Jiangcheng sun was climbing to its noon peak, the river sparkling with a million flecks of gold, the foghorn of a cargo ship long and distant. Wen Yining opened her eyes again, picked up another phone, and sent a message to her brother, Wen Yichen. She typed only 6 words. That apartment, keep it frozen. By his 4th day in Sonia, Jiang Tingshen had finally shaken off the last of the jet lag. At 6:30 in the morning, barefoot on the balcony, he cradled a cup of black coffee brewed from the hotel machine and watched the sun inch its way up from beneath the sea. The water was first a grayish blue, then pale gold, and finally burned into a blinding expanse of shattered silver by the daylight. A few seagulls burst out of the coconut groves, skimming low across the crests of the waves, their cries crisp and distant. He was waiting for a call. At exactly 6:45, his phone vibrated right on schedule. Encrypted line, the caller ID showing only 2 characters, Lu Chen. Jiang Tingshen answered, his voice still carrying the early morning rasp. Speak. Lu Chen's voice came through the receiver, steady as a block of polished granite. Boss, I've finished organizing everything you asked for. Every abnormal fund that Pei Jinyan has handled at the Wen Group over the past 5 years, 47 pages in total. I just sent it to your encrypted email. Jiang Tingshen set the coffee cup on the balcony railing, walked back inside, and picked up his tablet from the nightstand. The email was already there, the attachment a compressed folder. Unzipped, it revealed dense spreadsheets and scans. Lu Chen continued. I'll walk you through the timeline. First, the total. Over the past 5 years, Pei Jinyan has siphoned a total of 203.4 million yuan out of the Wen Group through inflated R&D outsourcing contracts, fictitious technical consulting fees, and fragmented project payments. Every single cent of that 200 million plus eventually flowed into a company under his mother's name, Jinheng Investment. Jiang Tingshen's fingers slid across the tablet, pulling up screenshot after screenshot of bank transactions. Each transfer was flagged with a red box, the amounts ranging from a few $100,000 to tens of millions. The names of the receiving parties changed constantly, but if you drilled through to the ultimate beneficiary, there was only ever one actual controller, Pei Jinyan's mother, Song Jinhua. Lu Chen went on, his tone utterly emotionless, like someone reading aloud from an audit report. The most interesting one is from March 2 years ago. The Wen Group signed a technology introduction contract worth 46 million with a German battery materials supplier, supposedly to bring in the other party's thermal management solution. Except this German supplier does not exist. The registered address is an abandoned factory on the outskirts of Munich, and their so-called website was a template knocked together by a freelancer. And after the money was sent? Jiang Tingshen asked. After the money was sent, it sat in the German account for less than a week, then was broken into 3 tranches and transferred to an offshore company in the Cayman Islands. Lu Chen paused for a beat, then added, "The name of that offshore company you will definitely recognize. Azure International Holdings." Jiang Tingshen's eyebrow lifted. Azure International, the very same shell company that had absorbed 4% of his Wen Group shares 3 days ago. So Pei Jinyan was stealing from the Wen family, using the exact same shell I used to cash out. The exact same shell. But it is not as odd as it sounds. Azure International is a multi-layered holding platform with dozens of shell companies hanging beneath it. Pei Jinyan used one chain. We used a different chain.
The 2 lines have no direct connection.
It just goes to show that this platform is big enough, messy enough. Everyone uses it as cover. Lu Chen's tone gained a trace of irony. In other words, Pei Jinyan stole over 200 million and thought he was hidden so well not even heaven could see. He never realized he was dumping his dirty money into a pool that anybody could swim into. Jiang Tingshen set down his coffee and sat on the sofa. He opened the page in the file labeled Jinheng Investment, which showed the equity ownership map of all companies under Song Jinhua's name. A dense web of arrows pointed from one shell to another, and every line ultimately converged on a single name.
Pei Jinyan.
Jiang Tingshen asked, "Where did he spend the money?" Lu Chen replied, "I traced it. 3 parts. First, he bought 2 standalone villas in the most expensive part of Jiangcheng under full cash payment. 86 million total, registered under Song Jinhua. Second, he opened a VIP gambling account in Macau under her name, with cumulative bets exceeding 50 million over the past 3 years. Third, and this is the most ironic, he used the Wen family's own money to invest in a competitor. That stellar source new energy company that claimed last year it was going to challenge Deep Blue technology, 1.2 million of its angel round came from Pei Jinyan. Through Song Jinhua's shell, naturally. Hearing this, Jiang Tingshen let out a short laugh. It was a brief sound, entirely devoid of warmth. Pei Jinyan had taken the Wen family's money to secretly fund their competitors, all while sitting across from Wen Yining every day, playing the part of the loyal, devoted vice president, working himself to the bone for the Wen Group. Every frame, the way he served her food at family banquets, the eagerness with which he deflected tough questions for her in meetings, the quiet contempt in his eyes whenever he brushed past Jiang Tingshen in the hallway, every single frame was now coated in a layer of filth.
Lu Chen asked boss, "How do you intend to use this evidence?"
Jiang Tingshen did not answer right away. He stood and walked back out to the balcony. The sea breeze pushed against his loose linen shirt, puffing it up like a sail. On the beach below, early risers were already jogging along the shore, their silhouettes stretched long and thin in the morning light. He was silent for a moment, then said, "Hold it for now.
We are still missing one piece."
Lu Chen understood instantly. The patent matter?
Correct.
Pei Jinyan embezzling 200 million. That is money he stole from the Wen family. Legally speaking, Wen Yining is the victim. It should be her job to uncover it. But the patents are different. Jiang Tingshen's voice dropped.
"The patents are mine."
Lu Chen picked up the thread. "I already asked Qin Mo to investigate. The Wen Group is currently negotiating a massive smart energy management system deal with the state-owned Guaning Group, a total contract value of over 10 billion. I obtained a summary of their technical proposal. The section on the solid-state battery management system overlaps heavily with 2 of Deep Blue's core patents, granted 3 years ago. The overlap is so precise that even the patent citation format is identical, except they deleted every instance of Deep Blue technology and replaced it with Wen Group R&D department. Jiang Tingshen's hand tightened around the phone, his knuckles whitening slightly. Lu Chen asked, "Do you want me to have the legal department send a patent infringement cease and desist letter to Guaneng right now?" Not yet. Jiang Tingshen gazed at a white sailboat drifting slowly across the sea, his voice returning to its usual calm. First chain together every node of Pei Jinyan's money trail. Every link needs a corresponding bank record and business registration document. There can be no holes for anyone to argue against. As for the patents, tell Qinmo to keep digging deeper. I want to know exactly how those patents traveled from Deep Blue into the Wen Group, who handled them, who altered them, who signed off.
Lu Chen acknowledged the order, then asked, "What is your timeline?"
The 4th of next month, the May 4th Youth Innovation Summit. The Wen Group is a co-host, and Pei Jinyan is scheduled to give a keynote speech. Jiang Tingshen picked up his coffee cup, found the coffee had gone ice cold, and set it back down. On the day of the summit, I want him to swallow every single word he says on that stage. Lu Chen was quiet for 2 seconds, then said, "Understood. I will have all the materials organized to litigation standards before the summit."
One more thing, he paused, his tone shifting slightly. Wen Yining's secretary called our company's front desk this morning, wanting to schedule a meeting with the founder of Deep Blue Technology to discuss cooperation.
Jiang Tingshen did not respond. Lu Chen asked, "What should I tell them?" Jiang Tingshen said, "Tell them nothing. If she genuinely wants to cooperate, let her first find out who the thief is inside her own company."
He hung up.
Setting the tablet on the rattan side table on the balcony, he looked at the capital flow chart glowing coldly white in the morning light. Those dense numbers and arrows looked like a net drawing ever tighter, and at its center, the name Pei Jinyan was boxed in, circle by circle, with no way out. He leaned back in the lounge chair, put on his sunglasses, and closed his eyes. In his ears were the sounds of waves crashing on the shore, the rustle of coconut palms in the wind, the occasional laughter of distant joggers. The Sonia morning was as tranquil as a painting. Beneath that painting, a blade that had been sharpened for 5 years had finally found its edge. That same morning, in Jiangcheng, inside the Wen Group headquarters, Pei Jinyan sat in his vice president's office. In front of him was a cup of pour-over coffee his assistant had just brewed, the temperature perfect, the aroma rich. He was reviewing the 3rd draft of his summit speech, the computer screen packed with meticulously formatted text and charts. He was extremely pleased with the title he had chosen, The Breakthrough Path for Young Entrepreneurs, taking the Wen Group's new energy strategy as a case study. Breakthrough path, those 2 words made him feel as though he were indeed striding down the path of a breakthrough. The internal line on his desk rang. He pressed the speaker button, and his assistant's voice came through.
"Vice President Pei, the Guoning Group called."
"They are very interested in our technical proposal, especially the battery management system section. They want to ask about our core patents to facilitate their due diligence." Pei Jinyan took a sip of coffee and said, "Offhand, tell them all the technology was independently developed by the Wen Group R&D department. All patents are in order. They have nothing to worry about." The assistant acknowledged and hung up. Pei Jinyan put down his cup and returned to editing his speech. He had absolutely no idea that less than 200 meters away, in the legal department, Wen Yining was pulling an internal risk alert report on potential patent infringement related to Deep Blue technology. And he certainly had no idea that 12,000 kilometers away on a beach in Sonia, a man in a linen shirt had just pressed save on his tablet, tucking that encrypted file documenting 47 pages of financial crimes into the deepest folder of the cloud. The name of that folder consisted of exactly 2 words: close the net. By his 7th day in Sonia, Jiang Tingshen felt he had tried every possible way to drink coconut water the island had to offer. Iced, spiked with rum, blended with mango juice, even straight from the shell with a spoon scooping out the flesh. The lazy days on the tropical beach had melted away the exhaustion that had built up over 3 years, but they had not loosened the string that had been pulled taut inside his brain. On the morning of the 8th day, that string was plucked hard. Jiang Tingshen was having breakfast at the hotel restaurant, a plate of tropical fruit and half a glass of unfinished coconut water in front of him. The floor-to-ceiling windows were wide open, the sea breeze making the white gauze curtains billow in and out, the air thick with the mingled scents of fresh bread and coffee. He was just lifting a piece of papaya to his mouth when his phone rang.
Not a message, an encrypted call request.
Caller ID Qin Mo.
Qin Mo rarely made phone calls, The tech obsessive who had spent a decade in Silicon Valley communicated almost exclusively through emails and code commit logs. He barely even used messaging apps. If he was calling, there was only one possibility: something had gone wrong, and on a technical level.
Jiang Tingshen set down his fork and answered. His voice kept low.
Qin Mo, tell me.
Qin Mo's speech was nearly twice its normal speed, his anger barely contained.
Lao Jiang, what you asked me to investigate? I found it.
That technical proposal the Wen Group submitted to Wen Group last month for the smart energy management system, I got a full copy through contacts. 230 pages in total. I've gone through it page by page. Here is the conclusion.
Go ahead.
The core architecture of their solid-state battery management system is supported by 7 key patents. 5 of them are patents that Deep Blue technology already holds. The patent numbers are unchanged. Even the labels on the attached diagrams are identical. The only thing they did was delete every mention of Deep Blue technology and replace it with Wen Group R&D department. Qin Mo drew a sharp breath. The other 2 are even more outrageous. Those are a novel anode material formulation and a packaging process we just passed substantive examination for last year and have not yet been published. Both are currently in unpublished status at the International Patent Office.
And you know what?
The Wen Group listed them as their own independently developed core technologies in their bid, complete with experimental data and performance comparison charts that are practically identical to Deep Blue's originals. Jiang Tingshen put his fork down on the plate very softly. The metal clicked against the porcelain with a crisp sound. Other guests in the restaurant were chatting and laughing over their breakfasts, and no one noticed the man in the corner, whose face was growing cold in an extremely controlled manner.
Qin Mo, Jiang Tingshen's voice was still steady, but it was the steadiness of a steel cable a fraction of a second before it snaps. You're telling me they used our experimental data directly in their bid?
Verbatim. They even copied the temperature error from our 3rd batch of tests, a systematic error of 0.3 degrees. I had flagged it for the team to correct, and we hadn't gotten to it yet. The Wen Group's bid copied it exactly. Qin Mo let out a cold laugh, cheating off someone's paper and even copying the typo, and this man gets to be a vice president. Jiang Tingshen stood, phone to his ear, walked out of the restaurant and did not stop until he reached a massive banyan tree in the hotel garden. The canopy cast a wide pool of shade, and the hanging aerial roots swayed gently in the breeze. He asked, "Can you confirm who handled it?" Qin Mo replied, "I checked the electronic document properties of the Wen Group's bid. The creator field says Wen Group R&D department, but buried in the edit history is a deeply hidden author ID, Pei Jinyin's personal account. He probably thought deleting the name prefix would make it untraceable. He doesn't understand tech. The metadata of a Word document retains every user's edit information, and even if you manually erase it, any data recovery tool can dig it back out. I've taken screenshots of all that metadata, 170 edit records, and every single IP address points to Pei Jinyin's office computer." Jiang Tingshen leaned against the banyan's trunk and looked up at the sky through the layers of leaves. Sonia's sky was a pure, empty blue, not a single cloud, so clean it looked artificial.
He suddenly found it very funny.
3 years ago, he had shared these technical concepts with the Wen Group's technical team as personal opinions, purely out of a husband's goodwill toward his wife's career. He had assumed those suggestions would be used as starting points for discussion. He never imagined Pei Jinyin would treat them as a free mine, dig them right out, not even shake off the dirt, pack them up wholesale, slap an independently developed label on them, and use them to swindle a state-owned enterprise out of a 10 billion yuan deal. Qin Mo asked, "Lao Jiang, do you want me to have the legal department send a cease and desist letter to Guoning right now, notifying them of the Wen Group's infringement?" "Not yet," Jiang Tingshen said, his tone turning calm again. He straightened up and walked toward the hotel beach, his flip-flops slapping the stone path in a steady rhythm. Qin Mo grew agitated. "Not yet. They're about to sign the contract. Guoning is doing the final technical review next month. Once the Wen Group's bid passes that review, the deal will be done.
Going after them later will be 10 times harder."
Qin Mo, listen to me.
Jiang Tingshen stopped under a row of coconut trees at the edge of the beach and fixed his gaze on the distant horizon. Wen Group is not stupid. Their technical due diligence team is among the best in the domestic new energy sector. If we send a lawyer's letter now, the most they will do is pause the review and discuss it privately with the Wen Group. The Wen Group will hire a couple of lawyers, drag it out for 6 months, and the whole thing will fizzle out.
That won't hurt at all.
Then what do you plan to do?
I want Pei Jinyin in the most public setting possible, in front of everyone, to personally swallow the words independently developed back down his own throat. Jiang Tingshen's tone was so calm it sounded like he was stating tomorrow's weather forecast. The May 4th Youth Innovation Summit, he has a 40-minute keynote speech all about the Wen Group's independent innovation. He's going to use that mouth to blow stolen goods into a beautiful flower. So I will make him stand on that very same stage and watch that flower be pulled apart, petal by petal. Qin Mo was silent for a few seconds, then drew a deep breath. He understood. Lao Jiang, you're going to nail Pei Jinyan in front of the entire industry. Not just Pei Jinyan. A hint of sharpness finally edged into Jiang Tingshen's voice. Over the past 3 years, everyone who thought I, Jiang Tingshen, was only fit to pour tea for the Wen family. They are all going to be sitting in the audience at that summit. I want them to see clearly who that live-in son-in-law they treated as invisible really is. Qin Mo slowly exhaled. All right, the summit is less than 20 days away. What do you need from me? 2 things. First, take all 7 patent applications, grant certificates, original experimental data, and metadata tracking logs, bundle them into a single evidence package, notarize it to litigation standards, and make sure no date has any flaw. Second, prepare an external press kit on Deep Blue Technologies' founding team, you, me, Lu Chen, plus the core R&D team's resumes. I'll need it at the summit, Qin Mo said. Understood. But, Lao Jiang, have you considered how Wen Yining will react? Pei Jinyan is her most trusted vice president. Exposing him at a summit she co-hosts, it will be like slapping her across the face in front of the entire industry. Jiang Tingshen crouched down and idly traced circles in the sand with his finger. He was silent for a long time, so long that Qin Mo thought the signal had dropped, before he finally spoke. Wen Yining is a smart person. But the biggest flaw of smart people is that they trust their own judgment too much. When she looks at Pei Jinyan, she does not see Pei Jinyan the person. She sees memories from childhood, the Wen family's reputation, her parents' approval of the Pei family. All those things layered together are more convincing than any evidence.
Jiang Tingshen stood up and flattened the marks in the sand under his foot, his voice carrying no anger, no regret, only the calm of someone who has seen through everything.
So to make her see the truth, just handing over evidence is not enough.
She needs a slap loud enough for the entire Jiangcheng business world to hear.
Qin Mo did not argue further. He simply said, on the day of the summit, I will fly back from Silicon Valley and stand beside you. Jiang Tingshen allowed himself a small smile and ended the call. The sea wind picked up, the coconut fronds rustling like the applause of a distant crowd. Jiang Tingshen pocketed his phone, bent down to pick up a shell washed ashore by the tide, turned it over in his hand, and then flung it far out into the sea. The shell skipped twice on the surface, then sank. Jiang Tingshen turned and headed back. The white sand crunched softly under his feet. In his head he counted the days. 19 days until the May 4th Youth Innovation Summit.
19 days.
All the coconut water he had drunk in Sonia, all the sunshine he had soaked in, all the energy he had restored. Every bit of it would be converted into the precise wording of every sentence he would deliver at that summit. The net was already woven. He was just waiting for the day to pull it closed. On the 3rd day after returning to Jiangcheng, Jiang Tingshen moved into the standalone villa at Lanyu Bay. He had bought this villa 3 years ago through Deep Blue Technologies' overseas platform. The property was registered under the company's name, and from the outside, there was absolutely nothing to connect it to Jiang Tingshen. The house sat on a peninsula surrounded on 3 sides by water on the outskirts of Jiangcheng, enveloped by a dense forest of dawn redwoods. The only entrance was a private lane, with neighbors separated by at least 50 meters of green buffer. The privacy was impeccable. When Fang Yu drove him from the airport and the car came to a stop, Jiang Tingshen immediately spotted 2 figures waiting at the door. One was the cleaning lady Fang Yu had hired, who had already scrubbed the entire house from top to bottom 3 times, and was now carrying her tool bag toward the side door. The other was a man in his early 40s, gaunt, his hair more than half gray, his eyes sunken, wearing a faded dark blue windbreaker. He was clutching a black portable hard drive case with both hands. Jiang Tingshen got out of the car, walked toward him, and greeted, Shen Yi. Shen Yi's lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but the only sound that came from his throat was a hoarse rasp. He had been the head of the Wen Group's R&D department, had worked there for 7 years, led over a dozen solid-state battery projects, and was the most senior and technically sound engineer in the entire division. In March of the previous year, he had been abruptly fired for leaking trade secrets. On the day he was dismissed, he was not even allowed into his office. His personal belongings were stuffed into a black garbage bag by security and dumped at the reception desk for him to pick up himself. The incident had caused a minor stir in Jiangcheng's tech circles at the time, but it was quickly suppressed. The Wen Group was one of Jiangcheng's largest taxpayers, and no one was going to offend the Wen family over a fired mid-level manager. Jiang Tingshen extended his hand.
Shen Yi hesitated for a second before reaching out with his own thin-veined hand and shaking it firmly.
His palm was covered in cold sweat, his knuckles as chilly as if he had just pulled them from ice water.
Come in.
Jiang Tingshen led Shen Yi into the living room. Fang Yu had already set out the tea set. A freshly brewed pot of lapsang souchong was steaming, its fragrance spreading through the spacious room. Shen Yi sat down on the sofa, his back ramrod straight, knees pressed together, visibly carrying the ingrained tension of someone long accustomed to being suppressed. Shen Yi, Jiang Tingshen said bluntly, I received the message you passed through Fang Yu. You said you had direct evidence that Pei Jinyan switched the patents. Can you show me now? Shen Yi said nothing. He placed the black hard drive case on the coffee table and unclipped the latch. Inside was an immaculately preserved solid-state drive. A label on the shell bore a line in marker pen, original data backup, do not delete. Shen Yi's voice was very low, as if he was afraid of being overheard, even though there was not a single soul within 100 meters of the villa. Mr. Jiang, last March, Pei Jinyan suddenly showed up at our R&D department with a group of people. He said it was a special technology innovation acceleration plan approved by headquarters, and demanded I hand over all the technical data on 3 core projects. I knew something was wrong right away. What kind of acceleration plan skipped straight to the raw data without even glancing at a technology roadmap? That was not collaboration, that was looting. Jiang Tingshen nodded, signaling him to continue. Shen Yi went on, I kept an eye out. Before I packaged up all the materials and sent them to his team, I made mirror backups of every single file in its original version, creation timestamps, revision histories, login IPs, operation logs. 437 files in total, 32 sets of core experimental data, all saved onto this drive. He then pulled a palm-sized notebook from the inner pocket of his windbreaker and flipped to a page marked with a sticky tab. And I also saved the versions after Pei Jinyan's team altered them. Jiang Tingshen took the notebook. The pages were filled with Shen Yi's handwritten records, line after line, each noting the file name, original creator, time of alteration, editor ID, and IP address. The writing was tiny and dense, in places so scrawled it was barely legible, but it radiated the desperate urgency with which the recorder had been working against the clock. Shen Yi pointed at one entry. Mr. Jiang, look at this one. On the night of March 19th last year, at 11:37 p.m., Pei Jinyan's office computer logged into the R&D department's internal server and directly edited the original document of the solid-state electrolyte interface optimization plan you had shared with us. He deleted your name from the author field, replaced it with Wen Group R&D department, and then altered the file's creation timestamp to try to erase the traces. But Shen Yi's finger moved to the next line. What he could not change were the server-side operation logs. The logs clearly recorded every keystroke, every mouse click, every file saved during that time window. I exported all of those logs. They are all on this drive. Jiang Tingshen closed the notebook and looked at the black drive on the table. It gleamed with a matte finish under the light, small enough to fit in a palm, weighing only a few dozen grams. But what it contained was enough to grab a vice president in charge of a 10 billion yuan project and yank him from the clouds, slamming him to the ground until he shattered.
Shen Yi, why didn't you take this directly to Wen Yining at the time?
Shen Yi let out a bitter laugh. That laugh carried far too much grievance, fury, helplessness, and the utter disillusionment of a man betrayed by the company he had served faithfully for 7 years. I did. The day after Pei Jinyan's people took the materials, I knew something was wrong. I went straight to President Wen the next day.
What did Wen Yining say?
She said she would look into it. Shen Yi rubbed his brow with his fingers. After saying these words, he closed his eyes briefly, as if reluctant to recall what came next. I did not get President Wen's findings the following day. What I got was a termination notice from HR, on the grounds of leaking trade secrets. The person who signed it was Pei Jinyan. Jiang Tingshen remained silent. Shen Yi kept talking, as if determined to pour out everything he had held in for a year. I worked at the Wen Group for 7 years. From the very first solid-state battery pilot line, I led a team that pulled hundreds of all-nighters. Half of the Wen Group's technical foundation was built brick by my team.
What does Pei Jinyan know about technology?
He cannot even tell the difference between a lithium battery and a solid-state battery. The only thing he knows is how to present other people's achievements as his own in front of President Wen. After I was fired, nobody in the entire R&D department dared to say a word.
Who would dare?
The next one to speak would be the next Shen Yi. Jiang Tingshen asked, "You held on to this evidence for a whole year. Why are you willing to bring it out now?"
Shen Yi lifted his head and looked at him.
His eyes were slightly reddened, but his gaze was unwavering. He pointed at the drive.
Because the other day I saw the live stream preview for the May 4th summit.
The guest list includes Pei Jinyan, and the title of his speech is The Wen Group's Path of Independent R&D and New Energy.
Independent R&D, he gritted his teeth as he repeated the phrase. He is going to stand up on a stage that big and talk about independent R&D.
I cannot stomach it.
Even if not a single soul believes me, I have to lay the truth out in the open. Jiang Tingshen stood, walked over to Shen Yi, and took the drive in his hand. I believe you.
Shen Yi froze.
And not just me, the entire industry is about to see it.
Jiang Tingshen handed the drive to Fang Yu, who was standing nearby. Scan and make 3 backup copies.
1 to Chin Mo, 1 to the legal department, 1 onto the company's encrypted server.
Then seal the original drive and preserve it as physical evidence. Fang Yu took the drive, nodded, and strode briskly into the study. Shen Yi remained on the sofa, looking as though he had not quite processed what was happening. The past year had been brutally hard on him. After being fired, he could not find any work in Jiangcheng in the same industry. No company dared to touch someone Pei Jinyan had blacklisted. His wife had taken their child and gone back to her parents' home. He had rented a tiny office, less than 20 square meters, in the West City Tech Park, scraping by on odd tech outsourcing jobs. He had thought that hard drive would rot in his hands forever. He had never imagined someone would actually reach out and take it.
Jiang Tingshen sat back down, picked up the teapot, and refilled Shen Yi's cup.
The tea poured in with a clear, bright sound, steam curling upward, enveloping Shen Yi's much-aged face. Shen Yi, there's something I need you to do next.
Tell me.
On the day of the May 4th summit, I need you to be there. Not as a spectator, but as the new director of solid-state battery technology at Deep Blue Technology. Shen Yi nearly dropped his cup. He stared wide-eyed at Jiang Tingshen, his lips trembling for several seconds before he managed to force out the words. What did you say?
Jiang!
Tingshen looked at him, his tone calm and unwavering.
You worked at the Wen Group for 7 years. You led over a dozen projects.
You know solid-state batteries, from formulation to packaging, better than anyone. Deep Blue urgently needs someone who can independently lead a technical team.
You lost a year.
Deep Blue will make that year up to you. Salary and title. Let Feng Yu go over the details with you. The size of your team, you decide yourself. I have only one requirement. On the day of the summit, you wear a Deep Blue technology badge and sit in the first row of the media section. Shen Yi's Adam's apple bobbed several times. He lowered his head, pressed the back of his rough hand hard against the corner of his eye, and then lifted his head again. His voice was no longer the hoarse, hesitant sound of a moment ago. It carried a strength that had been suppressed for far too long and had finally been ignited.
Mr.
Jiang, from today onward, my life belongs to Deep Blue. Jiang Tingshen said nothing. He simply raised his teacup and clinked it lightly against Shen Yi's.
A crisp ring of porcelain.
Outside the window, the dawn redwoods of Lanyu Bay stood silent in the afternoon sun, their reflections perfectly still on the lake's surface. But beneath that surface, the currents had already begun to churn. 17 days later, the May 4th Youth Innovation Summit would open at the Jiangcheng International Convention Center. 2,000 seats, 100 media outlets, state-owned enterprise representatives, government officials, industry associations, every heavyweight in the Jiangcheng business world would be present. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Pei Jinyan would step onto the center of the stage and hold forth about those independent innovations that did not belong to him. What he did not know was that the seat directly at the center of the first row had been reserved for the founder of Deep Blue Technology. What he did not know even more was that the transparent man he had crushed under his heel for 3 full years was already in the study at Lanyu Bay. All the evidence spread out before him, a red pen in his hand, line by line and clause by clause, tracing out the final outcome of his downfall. May 4th. Jiangcheng International Convention Center. Just past 8 in the morning, a long line had already formed outside the east entrance. Security personnel in matching black suits, invisible earpieces tucked into their ears, guided the crowd in batches with expressionless faces. The giant LED screen suspended above the main entrance scrolled through the summit's theme, Youth Innovation, Leading the Future, the lettering gilded and imposing. On the flagpoles lining both sides of the plaza, dozens of corporate banners snapped in the sea breeze. The two most prominent were a deep blue flag bearing the Deep Blue Technology logo and a dark red flag bearing the emblem of the Wen Group. The 2,000-seat main hall was already more than half full before 9 o'clock. The front VIP section held government officials, state-owned enterprise representatives, and heads of industry associations. The middle section was packed with entrepreneurs and investors from across the country. The rear and side media zones bristled with cameras on tripods. The live stream feed already connected. The online viewer count had surpassed 500,000 before the opening session even began.
Jiang Tingshen did not use the front entrance.
He arrived in a black business van that entered the VIP passage directly from the underground parking garage. Fang Yu and Qin Mo flanked him on either side. Qin Mo had flown back from San Francisco only the night before, his jet lag still written in the faint bluish shadows beneath his eyes. But his energy was high, his gaze bright as a pair of freshly charged lithium batteries. He wore a dark gray mandarin collar jacket, a sharp contrast to Jiang Tingshen's tailored navy blue suit, one the picture of a tech fanatic, the other of a founder about to take the stage. The three of them sat down in the VIP lounge. Fang Yu handed Jiang Tingshen a tablet displaying the summit's full agenda. The morning featured the opening ceremony and several roundtable panels. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon was Pei Jinyan's keynote speech. At 2 o'clock was the industry leaders' dialogue session. The special guest slot bore only 5 characters, founder of Deep Blue Technology. Fang Yu said quietly, "Tingshen Gi, the organizers still have no idea who you are. They only know the anonymous founder of Deep Blue is finally going to show their face." Qin Mo added, "The Wen Group is the same." Pei Jinyan was boasting to the media this morning that his speech is the most important segment of the day, that is going to build momentum before the Deep Blue founder makes their debut. He probably imagines Deep Blue's founder will be some white-haired old professor. It would never occur to him that it's you.
Jiang Tingshen smiled faintly and took a sip of mineral water from the coffee table.
Flipping through the agenda, Qin Mo added, "Pei Jinyan specifically requested that his speech be placed before yours, said it would warm up the audience for the industry leaders' dialogue. Let him talk first. The more enthusiastically he talks, the harder he falls." At 12:30, the lunch break ended, and attendees filed back into the main hall. The afternoon agenda was the most anticipated part of the day. Every camera in the media zone was powered on, and the live stream chat began scrolling rapidly. The VIP seating in the front row had been rearranged. Wen Yining was guided to the center seat, flanked by several senior executives from Wen Group. Today she wore a dark navy-tailored dress, a Wen Group pin on her lapel, her makeup polished, her posture composed, every inch the president in full control. But Fang Yu noticed one detail. From the moment she sat down, Wen Yining had lit up her phone screen 3 times, each time unlocking it, glancing at it, and then locking it again. There was no new message on her home screen. Fang Yu relayed this detail to Jiang Tingshen. Jiang Tingshen merely nodded and said nothing. At 1 o'clock sharp, the house lights dimmed, leaving only a single spotlight on the stage. The MC walked on and announced in a ringing voice, "Next, let us welcome Mr. Pei Jinyan, Vice President of the Wen Group, to deliver his keynote speech, The Breakthrough Path for Young Entrepreneurs, taking the Wen Group's new energy strategy as a case study." Applause rose, not thunderous, but polite enough. Pei Jinyan emerged from the right wing of the stage. He wore a black tailored suit, his tie the Wen Group's signature dark red, his hair impeccably combed. Under the spotlight he looked tall, straight and brimming with confidence. He walked to the lectern at center stage, placed his speech notes on the surface, adjusted the microphone, and then raised his head to deliver a polished, self-assured smile to the 2,000 faces before him. Distinguished leaders, honored guests, industry colleagues, good afternoon. His voice, amplified through the surround sound system, filled the entire hall, rich and forceful, clearly the product of extensive rehearsal. The opening was conventional, thanks to the summit organizing committee, thanks to the platform provided by the Wen Group, and then a pivot into the substance. Today I would like to share with you a major breakthrough by the Wen Group in the field of new energy. Pei Jinyan pressed a remote in his hand, and the giant LED screen behind him lit up with an elaborate R&D roadmap for Wen Group's new energy technology. The chart was beautifully designed, timelines, technical specifications, project names all laid out with perfect clarity. At the end of every R&D pathway were printed 4 characters, independent innovation. Over the past 3 years, the Wen Group has invested a cumulative total of over 2 billion yuan in R&D across 3 core areas: solid-state battery management systems, novel electrolyte formulations, and battery packaging processes. His eyes swept across the state-owned enterprise representatives in the front row, his tone growing more assured. I can tell you with great pride that all of the core technologies I have just mentioned were independently developed by the Wen Group's R&D department, and we hold complete, independent intellectual property rights. We have already filed 7 invention patents around these technologies, 5 of which have been granted.
Scattered applause came from the audience, primarily from the section occupied by Wen Group employees.
Pei Jinyan seized the moment to raise his volume, his voice now laced with undisguised arrogance. On the new energy track, the enterprises that can go the distance have never relied on capital market speculation and packaging. They rely on steady ground-level technology accumulation. Some companies, he paused deliberately, the faintest trace of a smirk at the corner of his mouth, may be valued at tens of billions but cannot produce a single core patent that holds up under scrutiny. Houses of cards like that collapse at the first gust of wind. The implication was far too obvious. A murmur rippled through the audience. Reporters in the back rows perked up, fingers flying across keyboards. Pei Jinyan had not named any names, but everyone in the room knew he was talking about Deep Blue Technology, that mysterious company valued at over 50 billion whose founder had never once appeared in public. The tech upstart that countless people speculated must have powerful capital backers behind it. In the VIP lounge, Chin Mo leaned back on the sofa, arms crossed and snorted.
House of Cards?
The patent he stole is from that very House of Cards.
Jiang Tingshen said nothing.
He sat on the sofa, his right hand resting on the armrest, his index finger tapping the leather surface in a steady rhythm. On the screen, the live feed of Pei Jinyan's speech was blown up across the entire wall. Every pore on that confident, almost arrogant face was visible in high definition.
Pei Jinyan was still going.
The Wen Group has chosen the hardest road.
We don't tell stories.
We don't hype concepts.
We rely solely on data point after data point from the lab, parameter after parameter from the production line. That is the true breakthrough path for young entrepreneurs. He clicked his remote, and the screen switched to a rendering of the Smart Energy project in cooperation with Wen Group. Magnificent visuals, detailed data, clearly produced by a top-tier design firm at great expense. Next month, the Wen Group will formally sign a strategic cooperation agreement with Wen Group for the Smart Energy Management System. The total project value exceeds 12 billion yuan. This will be the largest single project collaboration in the domestic new energy sector to date. And all the core technologies underpinning this project, he stretched out his hand toward the screen behind him, enunciating each word, all come from the Wen Group's independent innovation. This time the applause was genuinely warmer, mostly from the Wen Group employee section in the rear. A few people even stood up clapping with flushed excitement. Several state-owned enterprise representatives in the VIP section offered polite hand claps, but the majority of industry professionals simply sat with expressionless faces, their gazes carrying a guarded scrutiny. 40 minutes of speech, Pei Jinyan used the phrase independent innovation no fewer than 15 times, core breakthrough 8 times, and industry benchmark 3 times. Each time he said it, the Wen Group employees' applause grew louder. When the speech ended, Pei Jinyan bowed to the audience, straightened up, and added one final line. Thank you all.
The Wen Group looks forward to joining hands with all truly capable partners, and I emphasize, truly capable.
He bit down hard on the word truly, then walked off the stage with unhurried composure amid the applause. After stepping off the stage, Pei Jinyan made his way directly to the VIP section in the front row and settled into the empty seat beside Wen Yining. He leaned close and murmured something to her. Wen Yining nodded slightly, her expression unreadable. From his spot in the third row, Fang Yu observed every detail of this exchange. He lowered his head and sent Jiang Tingshen a message. The fish is in the net. On the main stage, the MC returned, holding a fresh cue card. She cleared her throat, her voice carrying a note of barely suppressed excitement. As the summit MC, she was one of the very few people who already knew what was about to unfold. Distinguished guests, we now move to the final segment of today's summit, and the most anticipated one, the industry leaders' dialogue. A rustle of movement swept through the hall. Many people adjusted their posture, and the cameras in the rear zoomed in unison. The live stream chat began to scroll at a feverish pace. Here it comes. The founder of Deep Blue is about to show their face. Over the past 5 years, one enterprise has created astonishing miracles in the new energy sector. From solid-state batteries to smart energy management systems, its technology patents span 23 countries, and its valuation has grown from 0 to over 50 billion. Yet the founder of this enterprise has never once appeared in any public setting in 5 years. No one knows who he is. No one has seen his true face. The MC paused. The air in the hall seemed to thin. 2,000 people collectively held their breath. Today, on the stage of the May 4th Youth Innovation Summit, the founder of Deep Blue Technology will make his first public appearance. She raised her hand toward the entrance at the left side of the stage. Let us give the warmest welcome to the founder of Deep Blue Technology, Mr.
Jiang Tingshen.
Jiang Tingshen.
When these 3 syllables emerged from the sound system, a bizarre phenomenon swept through the entire hall. No one clapped, not out of disrespect, but because every single brain in the room had short-circuited at exactly the same moment. Jiang Tingshen, which Jiang Tingshen, the son-in-law the Wen family had thrown out, the transparent man who had spent 3 years brewing tea in the company break room.
Wasn't he the one who walked away with nothing after the divorce?
Wasn't he the one who had fled abroad to escape his debts?
How could he possibly be the founder of Deep Blue Technology? The dead silence stretched for 5 full seconds before it was shattered by the piercing screech of a chair leg scraping against the floor. Wen Yining had stood up. Her movement was so fast and violent that her knee slammed into the seat back in front of her, but she seemed to feel no pain at all. Her eyes were locked onto the left side of the stage, her face draining from its healthy color to a ghastly white at a visible speed. Pei Jinyan's reaction lagged half a beat behind hers. First a puzzled frown creased his brow, then confusion turned to alarm, and alarm to sheer disbelief. His hands clamped down on the armrests, knuckles whitening from the force of his grip. Jiang Tingshen walked out from the left wing of the stage. He walked neither fast nor slow, his stride steady, his tailored navy blue suit catching the spotlight with a low, understated gleam. He did not look at anyone in particular. He walked directly to the microphone at center stage, planted his feet and lifted his head, his gaze sweeping calmly over the 2,000 faces before him. Behind him, the giant LED screen suddenly ignited. What appeared on the screen was not a Deep Blue Technology corporate video, not a display of technical achievements, it was a photograph, a wedding panorama blown up to an enormous scale. In the photograph, Wen Yining in her custom-designed gown stood at the center of the banquet hall, surrounded by guests and flowers, her smile radiant. And in the farthest, most inconspicuous bottom left corner of the frame, a young man in an ill-fitting suit stood in profile, head lowered, squeezed to the edge of the crowd, nearly cropped out of the picture entirely. The camera slowly zoomed in, frame by frame, magnifying that figure in the corner. The blurred outline sharpened, the lines of the profile resolved, until finally, that face and the face of the man standing on stage at this very moment became one and the same. A pre-recorded voiceover, a woman's voice, calm and measured, filled the hall. This photograph was taken at the wedding of Ms. Wen Yining, daughter of the Wen Group, 3 years ago. The young man in the bottom left corner is Mr. Jiang Tingshen, founder and CEO of Deep Blue Technology. For the past 3 years, he lived in Jiangcheng under the identity of the Wen family's son-in-law, until he and Ms. Wen Yining divorced by mutual agreement last month. The hall erupted. Not murmurs, not hushed whispers, a genuine gut-level eruption. People gasped aloud, sucked in sharp breaths, dropped water bottles that rolled unheeded across the floor. The reporters in the back went berserk, shutters clattering like a hailstorm on a tin roof. The live stream chat exploded from a few thousand messages to hundreds of thousands in a single instant. The server crashed for a full 3 seconds.
Wen Yining was still standing.
Her hands were shaking, her lips trembling, but she did not sit down. She stood there, a statue nailed to the spot. Pei Jinyan's face had drained of every last trace of color. His mouth opened and closed, like a fish tossed onto dry land. He whipped his head toward Wen Yining, desperately seeking some explanation in her face, but she was not looking at him at all. Jiang Tingshen began to speak. His voice, carried by the surround sound system, reached every corner of the hall, not loud, not soft, unhurried, as if he were telling a story that had nothing to do with him.
Good afternoon, everyone.
I am Jiang Tingshen. He paused, then added, you may be more familiar with my other identity, the live-in son-in-law of the Wen family, a transparent man who poured tea at the office, was ordered around at family dinners, was mocked at banquets, and was finally kicked out by his ex-wife with nothing to his name. The entire hall was utterly silent. But today, standing here, I would like to reintroduce myself to all of you. He raised his hand and pointed at the screen behind him. The image switched to Deep Blue Technology's corporate profile. Founded 5 years ago, global leader in solid-state battery technology, holder of 173 core patents, serving over 400 million users, latest valuation, 53 billion, nearly 7 times the market capitalization of the Wen Group. Deep Blue Technology was founded by me alone. Every line of code, every set of experimental data, every patent, none of it has any connection whatsoever to the Wen Group. Jiang Tingshen's gaze flicked across Wen Yining's face, too brief to register, and then settled squarely on Pei Jinyan. Now I would like everyone to take a look at a few things. Jiang Tingshen pulled a black remote from the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pressed a button. The image on the giant screen behind him split into a side-by-side comparison, displayed for every eye in the hall. On the left side of the screen was the patent certificate for Deep Blue Technology's solid-state electrolyte interface optimization, granted 3 years ago. The patent number was crisp and clear. The inventor column read Jiang Tingshen. The patent holder column read Deep Blue Technology. Every technical parameter was stamped with the red seal of the National Intellectual Property Administration. On the right side of the screen was an excerpt from the technical proposal the Wen Group had submitted to Wen Group for the Smart Energy Project. The section describing the core technology for electrolyte interface optimization was, word for word, identical to Deep Blue's patent documentation on the left. The only difference was that every instance of Deep Blue technology had been deleted and replaced with Wen Group R&D department. 2,000 pairs of eyes focused on those two screens at once. The comparison was too stark. Anyone with basic literacy could see it instantly.
Jiang Tingshen's voice was steady as a scalpel.
Just now, Mr. Pei Jinyan spent 40 minutes on this stage repeatedly emphasizing that all of the Wen Group's core new energy technologies come from independent innovation.
I now have a simple question for Mr.
Pei. He turned to face Pei Jinyan in the VIP section and enunciated each word with surgical precision. Why do the core technologies you tout as independent innovation look exactly the same as Deep Blue Technology's patent documents, right down to a 0.3-degree systematic error in the experimental data, copied verbatim? Every gaze in the hall swung toward Pei Jinyan like searchlights. Pei Jinyan rose to his feet, his lips trembling but still clawing at composure. He yanked at his tie and his voice turned shrill.
This is slander.
These technologies were independently developed by the Wen Group R&D department.
What proof do you have that we copied you?
Jiang Tingshen did not argue with him. He pressed the remote again, and a third set of evidence appeared on the screen. The original file metadata records Shen Yi had backed up. 170 revision entries listed line by line, each one stamped with a timestamp, an editor ID, and an IP address. Time of alteration, March 19th, last year, 11:37 p.m.
Editor ID, Pei Jinyan.
IP address, Wen Group Vice President's Office. Pei Jinyan's face went from white to ashen gray. Jiang Tingshen asked, Mr. Pei, would you like me to invite Mr.
Shen Yi onto this stage to verify every single entry in front of everyone?
Someone in the audience stood up.
The reporters in the media section had abandoned any pretense of decorum. They hoisted their cameras and charged directly to the foot of the stage, lenses aimed at Pei Jinyan's face in a frenzy of shutter fire. The live stream chat was scrolling so fast it was an illegible blur of color. But this was not the end.
Jiang Tingshen pressed the remote once more.
A fourth set of evidence filled the screen. The capital flow map Lu Chen had assembled, a dense web of arrows pointed from one shell company to another, every transfer labeled with its amount, date, and receiving account. 203.4 million yuan flowing out of the Wen Group's R&D budget, passing through 7 empty outsourcing companies, and finally converging into Jinheng Investment, the company under the name of Pei Jinyan's mother, Song Jinhua. The screen froze on a single figure, 203.4 million.
Mr.
Pei spoke earlier about the breakthrough path for young entrepreneurs. Jiang Tingshen's voice rang out with terrible clarity in the absolute silence of the hall. I would like to ask, is your breakthrough path using stolen patents to swindle a state-owned enterprise out of a 10 billion yuan contract? Or is it using inflated contracts to move the Wen Group's money, bit by bit, into your own mother's pocket? Pei Jinyan's legs buckled. He instinctively reached for the armrest to steady himself, but his hands were shaking too violently. He missed twice, stumbled backward, and his shoulder blades collided with the seat back with a heavy thud. He turned his head toward Wen Yining. Wen Yining was still standing. Her face was white as a sheet of paper, her lips pressed into a bloodless line, both hands clenched into fists at her sides, her fingernails digging deep crescent-shaped marks into her palms. But she was not looking at Pei Jinyan. Her gaze from beginning to end was fixed on Jiang Tingshen's face. Not once had it shifted away. On that face she saw a Jiang Tingshen she had never once seen in 3 years. Not the cautious, people-pleasing husband. Not the son-in-law who kept his head bowed at the dinner table. Not the transparent man she had assumed she could arrange, ignore, and dismiss as she pleased. This was a complete stranger. A man she had shared a bed with for 3 years and never, not once, truly seen. Pei Jinyan collapsed entirely. He stopped trying to argue, shoved aside the people beside him, and lurched toward the side exit. His gait was that of a drunk. His shoulder slammed into the door frame, and he nearly fell, but he did not look back. The side door banged shut behind him. The echo reverberated through the silent hall for several long seconds. No one went after him. Every gaze remained fixed on the man in the navy blue suit at the center of the stage. Jiang Tingshen turned off the screen, placed the remote on the lectern, adjusted his cuffs, and then faced the audience. He closed with a single sentence. 3 years ago, I walked into the Wen family as an ordinary man because I wanted to see whether, stripped of all external trappings, there could still be a truly equal bond between people. 3 years later, as I walk out of the Wen family, the answer no longer matters. His voice was very soft, but each word landed with complete clarity. What matters is that, starting today, Deep Blue technology no longer needs to hide behind anyone. He inclined his head slightly, turned, and walked off the stage. In that very moment, Wen Yining suddenly moved. She took one step forward, her lips parting as if to call out a name. But the 2 syllables caught in her throat and would not come out. Her knee struck the armrest of a seat. She swayed, and the assistant beside her hurried to steady her. In those few seconds it took her to regain her balance, Jiang Tingshen had descended the last few steps and vanished into the wings at the side of the stage. All she saw was his back. 3 years ago at the Civil Affairs Bureau, she had seen the same back. That day he had been wearing an old jacket with frayed cuffs, and he had not looked back when he walked out the glass door.
She had thought nothing of it then, had even found it a little petty.
A man I lifted out of poverty, walking away without so much as a thank you. Fine, let him go. Now she finally knew what that back had carried all along. A 53 billion yuan Deep Blue technology.
173 patents.
The most advanced tech empire in the solid-state battery sector. Achievements she, Wen Yining, might not match even if she worked another decade. And that man had poured tea at her family's dinner table for 3 years. The state-owned enterprise representatives in the VIP section were already murmuring among themselves. The senior executives from Wen Group wore grave expressions. One of them was typing rapidly on his phone, clearly briefing his superiors on what had just happened. The reporters in the back rows had abandoned any notion of polished press releases. They were drafting breaking news alerts directly on their phones, the headlines growing more explosive by the second. Deep Blue founder's identity exposed, the live-in son-in-law kicked out by the Wen family. Pei Jinyan accused of patent theft and embezzling 200 million. Wen Yining did not sit back down. She picked up her bag and, accompanied by her assistant, walked briskly toward the side door. At the door she stopped for 1 second, looked back at the empty stage, then pushed the door open and walked out. The hallway was quiet. So quiet she could hear the echo of her own high heels striking the marble floor. Pei Jinyan was nowhere in sight, but she did not care where he had gone. Her mind was filled with a single thought, a thought that had arrived 3 years too late. So that is how it was. 3 days after the summit ended, Pei Jinyan was intercepted by police at Jiangcheng International Airport. He had tried to slip through the VIP passage using a forged passport, but the border control system had received the Economic Crimes Unit's lookout notice 2 days earlier. When 2 uniformed officers closed in from both sides of the passage simultaneously, Pei Jinyan offered no resistance. He simply set his suitcase on the ground, clasped his hands behind his head, and crouched down. According to those present, his expression was very calm, even carrying a hint of relief, like a man who had been running too hard for too long, finally caught, and realizing he no longer had to run. That evening, the Jiangcheng Public Security Bureau Economic Crimes Investigation Unit issued an official statement. Pei Jinyan, former vice president of the Wen Group, had been formally detained on suspicion of embezzlement and misappropriation of trade secrets, with the case undergoing further investigation. The statement did not mention specific amounts, but the keen-nosed financial media had already spread the 4 sets of evidence screenshots from the summit across the entire internet. 203.4 million embezzled, 7 patents infringed, 170 falsified records. Every number was magnified, screenshot, forwarded. The name Pei Jinyan hung on the trending charts for 3 full days.
The Wen Group's stock price fell 35% over those 3 days.
Wen Yining did not have the luxury of mourning the stock price. On the 4th day after the summit, she convened an emergency board meeting. The conference room was packed with grim-faced shareholders and directors, many of them holding that day's financial papers, whose front-page headlines screamed with stabbing phrases like the truth behind Wen Group's innovation, patent theft, executive embezzlement, 10 billion yuan deal in jeopardy. Some demanded accountability. Some heaved heavy sighs. A few of the old shareholders even slammed the table and called for thorough punishment. Wen Yining stood at the head of the table and waited until everyone had spoken before she opened her mouth. Her voice was very calm, so calm it silenced every person in the room. The Wen Group takes full responsibility for everything Pei Jinyan has done. She swept her eyes over the shareholders present. All the funds he embezzled will be repaid to the company accounts out of my personal assets. All patent rights he infringed, the Wen Group's legal department will fully cooperate with Deep Blue Technologies' lawsuit, and the compensation will be paid according to the court's judgment, with no upper limit. Effective today, every manager at the vice president level and above in the Wen Group will undergo a renewed background check and financial audit. The R&D department will be completely restructured, and every pending patent will be re-verified for originality. A long silence settled over the conference room. Finally, the oldest shareholder slowly nodded, and one by one, the others set down their newspapers. After the meeting adjourned, Wen Yining remained alone in the empty room for a very long time. Outside the window lay the Jiangcheng skyline. The Wen Tower had once been the most prominent structure on that skyline. But now, less than 3 kilometers to the northwest, the new headquarters of Deep Blue Technology was rising from the ground, its glass curtain wall throwing back a blinding glare in the sunlight. 1 month after the summit, Wen Group formally announced the termination of its cooperation negotiations with the Wen Group and extended an invitation to Deep Blue Technology. The invitation letter, signed personally by Guaning's CEO, was phrased with utmost sincerity. Guaning hoped Deep Blue Technology would undertake the Smart Energy Management System project, and was willing to increase the total project value from 12 billion to 15 billion on the existing framework. Jiang Tingshen received Guaning's negotiating team in the conference room of Deep Blue Technology's new headquarters. The two sides talked from 10 in the morning until 6 in the evening, going over the technical proposal, implementation timeline, budget allocation, and intellectual property ownership. Every clause scrutinized to the smallest detail. In the end, Jiang Tingshen signed his name on the letter of intent. After the signing, Guaning's CEO stood and extended his hand with a smile. President Jiang, to be honest, your entrance at that summit was the most spectacular identity reveal I have ever witnessed. Jiang Tingshen grasped his hand and returned a calm smile. Thank you. But to me, it was simply finishing something that should have been finished a long time ago. That very evening, the news of Deep Blue Technology's contract with Guaning hit the front pages of every major financial outlet. The headlines were a world apart from those of a month earlier. Deep Blue Technology lands 10 billion yuan deal. Solid-state battery industrialization goes full speed. In the comments sections, netizens who a month ago had been asking who is Jiang Tingshen were now debating whether Deep Blue could break 100 billion valuation the following year. Another month passed, and Pei Jinyan's case entered the trial phase. The prosecution's indictment ran 140 pages, the charges including embezzlement, infringement of trade secrets, and money laundering. The trial lasted 3 full days. The court delivered its verdict then and there. Pei Jinyan was convicted on all counts, sentenced to 12 years in prison, deprived of political rights for 3 years, and all personal assets were confiscated. When the gavel came down, Pei Jinyan stood in the defendant's box in an orange detention center vest, his hair shorn short, patches of white already showing at his temples. He did not look at the gallery. He did not look at anyone. He simply kept his head down, folded the verdict paper smaller and smaller, and tucked it into his chest pocket.
Wen Yining did not attend the trial.
That same afternoon, she appeared in the reception room of Deep Blue Technology's headquarters. This was the first time Jiang Tingshen had seen her up close since the summit. She had lost a great deal of weight. The lines of her cheeks were sharper than before, but her gaze was somehow softer. That cold, imperious shell she had always worn seemed to have cracked apart along with Pei Jinyan's imprisonment. What was revealed beneath was no longer an untouchable heiress, but an ordinary person who had been deceived for 5 years and had spent an entire month painstakingly putting herself back together. Accompanying her was the Wen Group's newly appointed vice president of technology, a young man named Song Mingtian. Song Mingtian first gave a detailed presentation on the Wen Group's technical strengths in battery management system hardware deployment and its urban operational resources. Then he proposed a clear cooperation intent, The Wen Group hoped to form a long-term strategic technology alliance with Deep Blue Technology, focused on hardware-software synergy in smart cities. Not a merger, not a controlling stake, but an equal partnership. Jiang Tingshen listened to the entire proposal, then said a single sentence.
Cooperation can be discussed.
Let the technical teams start interfacing, beginning at the concrete project level.
Song.
Mingqian nodded, closed his folder, and excused himself from the room. Only Jiang Tingshen and Wen Yining remained. Outside the window, the setting sun was dyeing the sky a gentle wash of orange. The reception room lights had not been turned on. The dimness was just enough to see each other's faces clearly. The silence stretched for a long time, long enough to hear the faint hum of the central air conditioning.
Wen Yining spoke first.
Her voice was much lighter than before, no longer that perpetually taut, dry cold front tone, but something real, slightly hoarse, as if a great weight had finally been set down. Tingshen, for the past 3 years, I misjudged you. Jiang Tingshen said nothing. I went through every single account Pei Jinyan touched. I dug through 5 years of his approval records and contract files. She lowered her head, looking at her hands folded in her lap. Every fund he manipulated, every technical document he altered. It all happened right under my eyes. I did not discover any of it in 5 years. Not because he hid it so well, but because I never truly looked. I trusted my own judgment too much, trusted it to the point where I could be blind to evidence right in front of me. She raised her head and looked at him. The same goes for you. 3 years and I never once asked you. Jiang Tingshen, where do you go every day after you clock out at the office?
What are you thinking about?
What do you truly want to do? Jiang Tingshen leaned back in his chair, listened quietly, and then spoke.
President Wen. Don't call me President Wen.
She cut him off, her voice holding no command, only a tired plea. Jiang Tingshen was silent for 2 seconds, then changed his address.
Yining, what is past.
You do not need to apologize, and I do not need an apology.
He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the cargo ships drifting slowly along the distant river. A foghorn sounded, low and drawn out. Deep Blue and the Wen Group do have natural complementarity at the hardware and software layers for smart cities. This cooperation benefits both sides. I have no reason to refuse. As for the project-level interface, have Song Mingqian coordinate with Feng Yu. Qin Mo will personally oversee the technical proposal on our side. He turned around and faced her. But between you and me, this is where it ends. Wen Yining's lips moved, but no sound came. Not because of hatred, and not because I hold a grudge. Jiang Tingshen's voice was very steady, so steady even he was slightly surprised. It is because the Jiang Tingshen of 3 years ago, the one who would serve you food at the dinner table, wait for you to come home in the living room, and brew ginger tea when you were sick, that man ceased to exist the moment he finished signing his name at the Civil Affairs Bureau. The person sitting in front of you now was molded anew by those 3 years. He is not the man you once knew, and he no longer needs to be known by anyone.
Wen Yining lowered her head.
A long time passed before she lifted it again. Her eyes were faintly red, but no tears fell. She stood up, walked over to him, and extended her hand. Pleasure doing business with you, President Jiang. Jiang Tingshen took her hand. It was even thinner than he remembered. The knuckles pronounced, but her grip was firm, not the kind that pulled away after a light touch. She held on tightly, as if using the gesture to say things that could not be spoken aloud. Pleasure doing business with you, President Wen. He released her hand.
Wen Yining turned and walked out.
Her high heels struck the marble floor, tap, tap, tap. The rhythm steady, no pause, no looking back.
Jiang Tingshen stood at the window and watched her car pull slowly out of the Deep Blue Technology gates, merge into the main avenue of Jiangcheng, and finally disappear into the twilight in the distance.
Half a year later, on an evening after a technical review meeting on the top floor of Deep Blue Technologies' newly completed R&D center, Jiang Tingshen stood alone on the rooftop, letting the wind wash over him. The view from the rooftop was vast, commanding a panorama of most of Jiangcheng's high-tech district. In the distance, Deep Blue Technologies' new headquarters tower had already been topped out, its glass curtain wall reflecting a quiet golden glow in the setting sun. Feng Yu poked his head out from the rooftop door, holding a craft paper envelope. Tingshen GE, The gate guard just brought this. Said a woman dropped it off at the reception desk herself and left immediately, no name, no phone number. Jiang Tingshen took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a photograph, not the panoramic wedding shot from 3 years ago, but a brand new photograph. It showed the first operational autonomous bus station in the high-tech district's smart city pilot zone. The canopy of the station was lit with the blue logos of Deep Blue Technology and the Wen Group, side by side. The photo had been taken with great care. The light was warm and gentle. People stood in small groups on the platform, some checking their phones, some chatting. A small child crouched at the edge of the platform, curiously poking at the glowing logo. On the back of the photograph was a single handwritten line. The handwriting was neat and strong, a hand he recognized. Your world is truly beautiful. No signature, no addressee, not a single extra word. Jiang Tingshen turned the photo over and looked at it for a very long time. The wind on the rooftop was strong, whipping his shirt against his body. In the distance, the city was lighting up, building after building igniting like candles being lit one by one in the dusk. He slipped the photograph back into the envelope, the corner of his mouth curving into the faintest of smiles. Not a bitter smile, not relief, just a very calm feeling, like the last gentle stretch of a river just before it merges into the sea. Behind him, Deep Blue Technology's new logo lit up in the night sky, its deep blue light steady and unwavering, like a newly risen star. Fang Yu asked from behind, Tingshen Ji, should I find out who delivered it? Jiang Tingshen tucked the envelope into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and turned to walk back inside.
No need.
Let's go, there is still a chip tape out review meeting tonight. He pushed open the rooftop door and walked back into the brightly lit R&D center. In the night sky behind him, Deep Blue Technology's star still shone. It had not gone out.
And it never would.